Okay, good evening. This is a presentation to the WWV Amateur Radio Club. And this is Matt Deutch and Dave Swartz. That's myself. And we're going to present about WWV and VB, current things going on there, and then a little history of the WWV Amateur Radio Club. And so let me go ahead and hit the sharing button. And I'm going to share a screen here. And also, I'm going to see if I can't make sure that I got the speaker included in this. So, Matt, I think hopefully I get you to show up in the screen. I'm not sure. I might make a mistake here, but anyhow, we'll go ahead and move forward through this. And you tell me when to move ahead, and we're good to go. Can everybody see the screen okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
looks good.
Okay. So this is the presentation we gave. Oops, let me get over here. There we go. I did a little quick thing I thought was kind of fun. I asked Chat GPT, show me radio waves reflecting off the ionosphere, and this is what it decided to give me an image of, which I thought was kind of neat. Asked it a couple more times, so it's just trying to envision what Chat GPT thinks of this. I don't know if anybody's been playing with Chat GPT, but it's a pretty amazing tool. This was just for fun, but I've done some fun things with it as well. Also, I asked it for radio waves coming from Fort Collins, and this is what it came up with, which is not a bad view of the foothills and the plains merging. So I can't complain too much about that. This is another neat one coming off the plains. I don't know, it was fun. Anyhow, on to our presentation. Glenn's going to do his part on March 27th, but we're going to go ahead and skip to Matt. And Matt, I'm going to go ahead and click to this slide and you tell me where to go.
All right, this looks excellent. Yeah, this might be a little tricky. You're doing slides, and I'm got a split screen here looking at my notes. So hopefully we stay synchronized. Uh,
Okay.
my name is Matt Deutsch, N0RGT, and I've been the engineer at WWVB WWV since 1989. And if you've seen my other presentations, I think I told everyone I got interested in shortwave listening about 1974. Of course, heard WWV, thought it was pretty interesting, set all the clocks in the house for everybody, whether they wanted it or not. And it wasn't until 1992 I got my ticket. Uh, it took me a while to I once they introduced the no code technician, I was all in. So, if Glenn were here, he would have given his talk on WWV, which he did at the ranch. And I would say now that we've heard the history of WWV, we'll hear about the less glamorous NIST radio stations, and I'll give them a quick, brief history of them. They're WWVB and WWVL, and Steve Johnson will talk about WWVH next month, I believe. I gotta be able to advance my slides here. Okay, so uh, we'll start with WWVB, which has been operated for about 70 years now. Anyone who knows WWVB probably will know WWV, but not always the other way around, since it's not as well known as WWV. It transmits a 60 kilohertz carrier frequency, no audio, just a string of ones and zeros at 1 bit per second. Very easy to copy by hand if you want to decode it. And mainly its job right now, setting wall clocks and wristwatches across North America. And some laboratories still use it in place of having their own cesium or rubidium. 911 centers use it as a timestamp on their audio, and that way they can go back and, if someone challenges when a phone call came in or how long it took someone to respond, they can go back and look at the timestamp. WWVB currently resides at the same site in Fort Collins as WWV. Two transmitter buildings are about 1,000 feet apart, so very close to each other. Slide. Is Dave there? There he is. Okay. I gave this talk at the ranch last week. This is a map of the location. The bottom of the screen is the star that shows the ranch, Larimer County Fairgrounds, and WWVB is located at the White Star up there on Highway 1 west of I-25 between Wellington and Fort Collins. And you can easily see the towers lit up at night when you're driving north on I-25. Can see them as far south as Yellowstone Road in Longmont, if anyone's ever been up there, which is quite a distance. During my college days at CSU, I knew WWV was up in this area, and I mistook the WWVB towers for WWV, not knowing, that the WWV and towers were much shorter, being HF antennas much smaller. Slide. So the early days of WWVB, it started out as an experimental station. After using HF for a very long time, uh, NBS, National Bureau of Standards at the time, became interested in learning more about time transfer by 60 kilohertz. And this is a picture of the early experimental station in front of the Flatirons down in Boulder. Slide. And it began operation on the 1st of July, 1956, located at the Boulder Laboratories campus at 325 Broadway, which is where the NIST laboratories still are. That's where the atomic clock, the national standard, resides. And if you're counting, this is the third NBS, National Bureau of Standards radio station, where WWVH was the second after WWV. And WWVH started, I guess, about 1948. Slide. This picture gives a good view of the antenna layout. This one, much easier to see the cabling between the four poles. There's five total, one in the middle, and then the four corners. And you can see the radiating element is on the center pole, and then you reach the top, and electrically the cabling goes out to the four corners, and that forms a top hat. And the poles are 125 feet tall. And so some people may not be familiar with the purpose of a top hat, and so I'll give you a quick my understanding of what they do. If anyone understands differently, certainly during the question and answers, let me know if I've made any mistakes. But essentially, what you want with a good vertical dipole antenna is about a quarter wavelength of radiating element, quarter wavelength of the frequency you're operating on. But at 60 kilohertz, a quarter wavelength is about 1.25 kilometers long. And so that's about 4,100 feet for a quarter wavelength. HOA is not going to let you have a 4,000 foot tower. So what you have to do is build the antenna as tall as you can, economically and feasibly. And then at a right angle, you tip over the top of the antenna and keep going out using the top of the antenna, and you can spread it out in all directions, and that gives the current a place to go. The radiating element, the vertical part, you want to have the maximum amount of current, and so the top hat essentially acts as a reservoir or a capacitive top hat to store the energy, or absorb the current, spread it out, and then your down lead has much stronger radiation from it. And so that's one way to solve the problem. They're very inefficient antennas, though. Slide. So it had a 2 kilowatt transmitter and radiated 2 watts. So you can see just how inefficient it is. Slide. Oh, excuse me here. I need to get a drink of quick water. So KK2XEI gets a new name, a new call sign, WWVB, after about 3.5 years. As the experimental station, the call letters became WWVB on the 5th of March, 1960. Since the National Bureau of Standards has the WWV brand, if you will, it continued that line of WWV stations by adding a B to differentiate it from WWV. And the B is believed to stand for Boulder, just as WWVH, the H stands for Hawaii. Slide. So we'll leave, step away from WWVB for a minute after it got its call sign and talk about another low frequency NBS station, WWVL, that NBS was also wanting to experiment at 20 kilohertz. So VL stands for very low, and it had a 20 kilohertz carrier and began broadcasting just 1 month after WWVB got its call sign on the 5th of April, 1960. Slide. So here is a artist rendering of the WWVL antenna, which was set up in 4 Mile Canyon near Sunset, Colorado. It's in the foothills west of Boulder, and you can, these things, the antennas don't show up very well in photographs, so that's why I use the antenna artist rendering of it. You can see it a little bit better there, spanning the valley, and then there's a down lead that goes down to the transmitter site below. Slide. So the WWVL antenna had a 1 kilometer valley span antenna, about 3,280 feet across, 275-meter down lead, which is about 900 feet. It was copper coated steel cable, weighed about a ton, and it had an 8 kilowatt transmitter and radiated 14 watts, had an efficiency of 0.18%, but it was good enough that it had a reception as far away as New Zealand. Slide. Interesting thing was the paper that I was reading, that I was getting a lot of this information from. Talk about WWVL was only on 6 hours a day, and then in June of 1960, the broadcast became continuous. And except for what I found interesting was except for periods during the dark phase of the moon, which is the new moon, when another project used the antenna during the nighttime hours. So I can understand somebody using it at nighttime, maybe to experiment with different propagation at night, but why it had to be during the new moon seems very mysterious. I don't understand what that was about. So maybe be able to find that out and update the crowd when I find out what was going on, in 1960 with the dark of the moon. Slide. So the advantages, very quickly, of VLF and LF over HF are a more stable ground wave path and less distortion from the ionosphere, which make it more better for transferring time. Slide. So in April 1960, NBS now has two experimental stations, WWVB and VL, that they would like to put more, have a more permanent location for those. So, and the new site, they don't want it to be too far away from Boulder. They want it to be far enough that it doesn't interfere with other work that's going on at the laboratory, but it must be within driving distance of the Boulder laboratories. Slide. So NBS examines about 20 sites in northern Colorado and finally narrows it down to some farm fields between Wellington and Fort Collins. And if you look in the middle of this picture, there's a white patch. Yeah, right there where Dave's putting the cursor, there's white patch there. And this is July of 1959 when this picture was taken, and they decide that's the piece of land they want. And so somewhere in this picture is a poor, unsuspecting farmer, and the U.S. government's about to swoop in on them and condemn their land and give them fair market value for it. And Fort Collins in 1959 had about 25,000 people. It was just a small agricultural town. And so I can imagine, you're a farmer here outside of Fort Collins. You think you're really far from Washington, D.C., and all the shenanigans that go on there. You feel pretty safe, but they come and knock on his door one day and say, here we are. So we need your land for a radio station. So slide. So the land was acquired in 1961 by from Milo and Lucille Sabin. The whole site was about 390 acres. There were a couple small fractions of a piece of land bought from someone else, a Mr. Martinez, and the government paid $125 an acre, or about $1,250 an acre in today's dollars. So I don't know if you think that's fair or not, but that sure sounds like a pretty good deal for the government. So I was curious about what happened to Milo and Lucille after they lost their land to the radio stations. I did an internet search and found out that Milo was born in Iowa, and that's his. Here's their headstone. He's in the lower left corner there. It says Milo Rudd Sabin, and he was born in 1900, born in Iowa. And what's interesting is he spent some time in Laurel, Nebraska, where his wife is from. If you look, she's at the bottom center there, and she was born in 1905, and she was born in Laurel. So he must have found his wife there. They moved to California. Their children were born in California. The 1940 census says he was a bank teller uh, in Los Angeles or near Los Angeles. And then he moved to, at some point, move after 1940, moved to Colorado. I don't know if he got tired of the rat race in Los Angeles, but he became a farmer. And the fact that, he's from Iowa and she was from Nebraska, maybe they had farming in their blood and decided that was where they wanted to be. And so they moved to, uh, you know, Colorado. Then they lost their land to the radio stations, moved back to California, died in California, but they've been buried in Windsor. Uh, Clarence at the top of the headstone here, I thought maybe that was his mom and dad, Clarence Sabin. But if you look at the date that Clarence was born, it was 1896. So he's only 4 years older than Milo. So he must be an older brother. And what's interesting is that Clarence's wife is also born in Laurel, Nebraska, and Milo's wife was born in Laurel, Nebraska. So it must be two brothers. Interestingly, two brothers maybe married two sisters, which I guess does happen. And it they made a happy life in California and Colorado, and ended up in Windsor, buried in Windsor, that is. Slide. So the grand plan for Milo and Lucille Sabin's farm was, and this is a model of the plan at some point. I don't know what happened to this model. I'd love to find out where it ended up, whether the person who made it got to keep it or somebody else got to keep it. I hope it didn't end up in a landfill. But if you look at the far left antenna, four towers, that's WWVL, where they set up VL. Um, the next one to the right of WWVL is WWVB, the four towers there. And then the big one in middle to right of center is a 20 kilohertz station that was planned that had 600-foot towers. This was going to be a worldwide, one transmitter to cover the world, 20 kilohertz. It'd be a one location uh, time station. And WWVB is way down in the right-hand corner, just some tiny little sticks, little antennas down in the far right-hand corner. And what's interesting is underneath the 20 kilohertz, the 600-foot towers, you see this, 3 to 4 story tall transmitter building. I can't imagine what they must have had, what kind of offices or research or what was going on, but those are huge buildings compared to what we have out there now. Um, so yeah, I don't know what became of the model. I'd love to find it out. Slide. And this is a sort of a higher up view of the area, give you a better view of the antennas and their layout. Slide. And then a bird's eye view of the model. And if you look in the lower right-hand area, it's hard to see, but there's an anchor. Actually, one of the towers has an anchor that's in the reservoir. And why they did this, we have no idea. Obviously, it was planned from the start since they have this little model here with the anchor out in the reservoir, and that has been no end of headaches. And that's not even our property. That belongs to the irrigation company that owns that reservoir. So we got our anchor on someone else's property in their water. And then when it freezes in the wintertime and the wind blows the ice and it puts a lot of strain on the guy wires. So we finally built a berm around it to protect the guy wires. It was expensive. Slide, please. Construction begins for WWVB and VL in July of 1962. Tower sections were brought in on cars to Wellington, and certainly a lot of stuff to keep track of there. Slide. So lightning actually destroys the WWV experimental station in Boulder in June of 1963, about 3 weeks before it was scheduled to move to Fort Collins. And the gentleman standing there is John Milton, electrical engineer in Boulder. He actually was working as the EIC at WWV and WWVB. He retired in 1989, and him retiring actually opened up the position for me to join the team at WWV. Slide. So the WWVB, WWVL transmitter building were completed in July of 1963. And there's the transmitter building, and in the background, you can see the WWVL antennas. Slide. So WWVB begins broadcasting on the 4th of July, 1963, with 4 kilowatts radiated. WWVL begins broadcasting what they think was the 6th of August. It was the first week of August. They think it was the 6th of August, 1963, with 500 watts radiated. And WWVL didn't last, it was only 9 years or so. And it ends operation in July 1972 when they figure the 20 kilohertz experiment is over. They're happy with 60 kilohertz and LF, or I'm sorry, HF. Slide. So this is what the antenna setup looks like roughly. WWVL is to the north, WWVB to the south. You can see a good, uh, this artist drawing. You can see the top hats really well, and uh, you can see what the size of the top hat is compared to the radiating element. And there's also on the left-hand side something called a standby antenna that I believe was supposed to be used for 60 or 20 kilohertz in case there was some sort of work being done on um, WWVL VB antenna system. The Tower 9 was built in 1964 in August, and I don't know if it was ever used for any standby operation. And it was sold in July of 1961 to a sheriff's department, and they were dismantling it in November of 1981, and things didn't go so well. And a young man named John Byron, I was only 22 years old. I was 21 at the time when this happened, so he'd be retirement age now if he were still alive. He was from Evans, and he was killed when the sounds like they were pretty close to having the tower dismantled when it fell over and killed him. So for years, I've been Glenn and I were trying to find out who this gentleman was that died in the accident, and it was very difficult. There's no mention that we could find anywhere in any of the government documents at the site that mentioned this event, and it wasn't a government antenna anymore. It was just on NIST property, so maybe they were just like, it's not our concern. So I'd like to find out what happened, find out if there's some sort of accident report or something like that. Slide. There's a picture of it laying on the ground. Somebody took this picture the same day or a couple days later. Looks like they're getting ready to cart away the rest of the tower sections that fell over. There's the concrete base in the foreground. Slide. And we've had our own share of tower issues. February 2001, our northernmost tower had an insulator fail. It was in a guy wire and it failed. And so when that guy wire let go, there was no tension and the antenna got pulled the other direction. And it took until about June of that year to get that repaired. We had to unstack the antenna, put in new tower sections, and restack it. And then it was all done by crane. We had a 400-foot crane come out and do that for us. Slide. And then last April, we had a top hat failure during a wind event where the wind was 65 to 90 miles an hour, depending on whose anemometer you believe. And yeah, Dave's sort of circling the area where the top hat failed. The triadic cable runs between those two towers from right to left, and it failed right at where the tower it meets the tower in that right-hand corner. And so that most of the not most of it, but that corner of the top hat collapsed to the ground, and spent most of the summer repairing it. So slide. And Dave came out and took some pictures. There I am pointing at the point of failure. There's a crimp, a sleeve that went on there, and the cable went in there, and it was crimped down in 1962 or so, and finally tore out of there, broke and pulled out. And Dave's got a lot of great pictures of all of this antenna failure stuff from this event at his WWV ARC website. Slide. And I'll wrap up the talk here with showing the QSL cards from WWVL. And I'm not sure why a duck was chosen, what this has to do with 20 kilohertz or radio stations or anything. Very interesting. It would just seem like a piece of clip art they found and just stuck it on there. And then if you look at the back, the serial number, the one I have is serial number 97. So there's fewer than 100 cards, QSL cards for WWVL out there. So if you have one, they're pretty rare. Um, it seems like they only sent out about 8 or 9 of those per year for the life of the station. So certainly less than 100. And slide. And the WWVB QSL card, which is what we still send out today if you send in a reception report, it's still not much better than the WWVL one. It's just some random mountains here, one color, and I guess that was good enough for everyone. And they said, print it. And then to learn more, certainly go to Dave's website here, WWVARC, or the club's website, .org to learn more. And that's the end of that.
Matt, thank you very much. That was really a great presentation about, a history that we're not as familiar with. And Glenn's going to give us more of the WWV history, the beginnings of it up until it moved in with WWVB and WWVL. When we look at that history, those stations were built first, and then WWV got moved in and joined in 1966. So Glenn will talk about that, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up a little bit, and
I do have a question, Matt. What happened to that really large set of towers? And you said that was 20 kilohertz as well.
The 60 kilohertz, or I'm sorry, the 20 kilohertz superstation was never built. That was the only place we ever saw it was in that model. And you could read about it was that just financially it just wasn't in the cards anymore, and that was the beginning of the space age, and people were talking about time transfer by satellite, which is
right?
crazy. So
Or were they going to use WWVL to test the frequency and then build the superstation on that same frequency?
that's what I believe. It's not clear why they built the two smaller. They called them pilot stations, WWVL and WWVB, the smaller
Right.
four tower ones. So I'm not sure why they built those and just not the 20 kilohertz superstation.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that would have really been something to see that sticking up in the air as well. It's pretty amazing.
I,
It's
I,
interesting looking, like Matt said, he mentioned that when he first was looking at the station up there as a college student, realizing, that's it. And he was thinking that was WWV. And of course, that's the first impression you get. In fact, looking at the symbol of our club, there are 8 towers there that stick up, and that's actually WWVB towers. We have to admit that they're more impressive than the HF station towers. They don't stick up like that, and they don't light up the night sky. And for those of us that were there in 2019 and have seen it in person, there is a real big difference between the towers. So it's pretty interesting. Well, I'm going to go
well,
ahead and go ahead, Fred.
question. Yeah, question from Matt. 20 kilohertz is at the upper range of human hearing. Were there any reports of animals being affected by transmissions? Were dogs howling at the moon or anything like that when that station was on the air?
That's a great question.
Not that I know of. I've never heard anything like that. I've heard of what do they call electromechanical vibration that you can have um, electromagnetic can induce a sort of vibration in metal. I know in our doorway in the front entrance of WWV, whenever it rained, you could hear the broadcast. You could stand in that door frame and you could hear the broadcast in the door frame. And then we got a new door frame a couple of years ago during a remodel, and you don't hear it anymore. But there was for a while there. I don't know what was causing it, but yeah, just especially when it was raining hard or really humid, you could hear it really well.
That's too bad you got a new door frame. I would have stuck with the old one. That's kind of cool.
I know it was fun during the tours. The people would stand in the doorway and they could hear it. And what's interesting is also it's 60 kilohertz. Isn't that what bats use to they use uh their
Sonar, yeah.
sounds. Yeah,
Ultrasonic.
60. So I wonder if it affects any bats, the 60 kilohertz bothers them, but I've never heard of anything about animals. The tower lights are what concern the bird lovers is tower lights can, I guess, confuse birds. That's the only effect on wildlife I've heard of.
Yeah. Any other questions you want to ask Matt real quick? We'll have time at the end here too. I'm gonna go ahead and move on and I'll talk a little bit. Whoops, let me see if I've got control here. There we go. So the WWV Amateur Radio Club really got started as a result of um, getting close to 2019 and a few people realizing that it was about the 100th anniversary of the event. I happened to go on a tour of WWV and WWVB with the IEEE in the fall of 2018. And it was brought up in the tour that they were approaching the 2019 event. And so it was kind of a neat thing to think about. I'm a member of the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club, so I went to the board and suggested that we maybe get involved. This is right in our backyard. It's the club territory. And so the board agreed that it would be a good thing to pursue. Kevin Utter had done some great coordination for the club to have tours with Matt up at WWV the summer before. And so he contacted Matt, and we met up with Matt in December. And that was the first time we got to meet and visit about the event. Let me get back. January and February, I don't know if you remember this, but in the beginning of 2019, that was a great big government shutdown that happened. And so put a kibosh on us being able to talk to Matt and coordinate with anybody about doing an event. We had broken the ice a little bit, but after the government was able to open up again at the end of January, I think it was, and into February, we let them get their act together a little bit again. But we approached them and we continued to plan for the event. In March through April, the planning was extensive. We got some other people involved. There were initially NCARC members, but others got involved in that period of time as well. And by the time we got to August, we had a trial run where we were able to bring together the RM Ham, which is a group here in Colorado that is a huge amateur radio support for the entire state. They provided some very important logistical support for us during the event. So they came out for the August trial run. We had an antenna that we were able to lift up. We got some great support from Elecraft and from Flex Radio and also from Step IR. So we had some antennas to put together from Step, and we assembled those and tested things out at the site. This is also a time when I met David Kasdan, Dr. David Kasdan, 88Y. He is at the Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. And he is a big member of the amateur radio group known as HAMSCI, HAMSCI.org. And this is the Ham Science Citizen Initiative. And the idea is that there's a lot of us ham radio operators out there that would like to participate and contribute to the scientific knowledge of amateur radio as well. And so they put together a cloud-sourced group. Well, not cloud, but you know what I mean. We're all on the net together and doing citizen science. It fits in well here in Fort Collins. We've got one of the oldest citizen science projects called COCORAS that was started back in 1997. And so citizen science projects are an interest of mine as well. And when David came and said that they would like to do a project along with the 100th anniversary, we hit off a good friendship. And David has been a driving force for what our club has done. And he was one of our first members, signing members of the second iteration of our club. He and his wife flew out for the event in August, which is over here. Whoops, did I get that right? Let me go back here. There we go. So he and, whoops, there we go. He and his wife came and flew out. This is David right there. We set up a tent and set up radios. Eric Tammy, KK8O is his call now, was very involved. Glenn Ella in the back here. N0EMP, no EMP. That was a great call sign. I thought that Greg picked out. So anyhow, we set up lots of antennas. This is Darren Callbeck and Mark Holbrook, two of our club members, current club members that were working on this. Of course, Mark is our communications director now, and we came out very close to the event and set up the very last antenna that we had to build, assemble a Step IR antenna. Logistics and operations included the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club, RM Ham, the Case Western Reserve University, NIST, of course, all the help that we got from Matt and the entire team that was there, as well as the Boulder office got quite involved in this as well. We had help from the Shiwai Amateur Radio Club. This is the Cheyenne, Wyoming Amateur Radio Club, just north of the border, just north of these antennas. And they came down and did work, and many amateurs at large. I can't tell you how many people got involved in this. And Fred can tell you a great story, and he did a great write-up on this as well, that he's given to many different clubs. But he had been on that visit with the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club the summer before this event came to fruition, or maybe 2 years before. And so when he found out that this was a big event, he came out from Wisconsin with his friend Bill, and they got to participate in this event. And now Fred is a big, important part of our club, and we're glad to have him. And so anyhow, this is the setup that we got, which was great. We had a whole bunch of trailers that we were able to get from a local group, and tents we set up. The comm trailer in the middle here is provided by RM Ham. And then they also provided a huge generator that we ran everything off. This is in a corner just outside of the security fence of WWV. I don't have a picture showing exactly where it was. Another view that we had WWVB antennas right above us. This is the WWVB South Array, and this is the tower that failed up here that Matt was talking about. But we have many campers out here, lots of people involved. Some of those people were famous. You might recognize Amanda Alden, K1DDN, and her husband Jeff Carrier, K0JSC. They came up from Canyon City. Excuse me, I was forgetting where they lived down in Canyon City, Colorado, and came up and operated. I have a similar picture of Fred and his friend Bill, almost the exact same angles at the exact same station. Fred, I should put that in here for this presentation too. We were there for 5 days, and the weather went from beautiful to wet and rainy. Colorado can do that in a quick blink of the eye. And so this is a night, I think the night prior to the October 1st celebration that was held, that shows the fog on the night lights at WWV. Or WWVB, excuse me. And very neat to be there. We had the participation of Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club members Phil and Luann Barnes, Phil Burke and Luann Barnes. They brought their Star Drive. They bought an ambulance and turned it into a ham radio station. It's really cool. And they brought it to the Museum of Discovery in Fort Collins and set it up as a public display. They got some kids on the air, and we talked to them up at the radio station up north, only about 10 miles north of them. The museum is kind of interesting because they do have a display about WWV. In fact, they have one of the original old light signals that got replaced. I don't know what time. Matt can fill us in and tell us what year that got replaced. But they ended up at the museum. They have a clock that shows the time, and they talk about it. But the one thing they don't have is an audio presentation of WWV. And I told them, we've got to push a button and you get to hear the beep for 30 seconds. But I couldn't convince them to do that yet. Other Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club members, Roger Johnson, K00I, did a great job setting up and running a satellite. Along with RJ, who did FM satellite. RJ, one of our club members, WA7 AA from Wyoming, did that. It was pretty cool. There we go. John Gibbons, N8OBJ, one of our founding members of the Reorganized Club. He is a Case Western Reserve employee. And Greg Ella from our club, N0EMP, had a great time in the RM Ham comm trailer. It was amazingly set up. They've got computer displays, lots of room for radios, power supplies, a Honda generator at their feet down there. A very, very fine facility. Darren Callback, KC0ZIE, our previous secretary, on the side with James Cizik, KI0KN. James is the technical advisor to the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club, and they are setting up a gigahertz, I think it's a 3 gigahertz microwave link. And this is how we did all the internet during the event in 2019. It was great. Mark Holbrook, our comm director, wrote an incredible program that did the logging for us. It took all of N1MM's data, put it into this program that he wrote that automatically then uploaded the data to Logbook of the World and to ClubLog, the OKRS system, in real time. And we were able to keep tabs on our count. This was the low of the sunspot cycle, unfortunately, but we did manage to get 10,000 contacts by the end of our 5 days operating. We felt pretty good about that. And again, N1MM, if you've never used that program, it's awesome. Simple, straightforward, and really easy to use. And again, the people that, the groups that supported us, Elecraft, Flex, Step IR, Heil, and then locally, the Great Outdoors provided all those RVs that we used, and Poudre Valley REA provided us some money, and they are the ones that provide the electricity to WWV. So it was kind of fun to get them involved too. And that was our big event in 5.5 years ago. It's hard to believe it was that long ago. We had so many different people. This is a picture of from the back of one of our QSL cards. And again, this is just a repeat of the logistics. One of the really great parts of that event was an official NIST celebration of the 100th anniversary. We kind of convinced them that they needed to do this, and that was kind of the fun part of this too. That I don't know if NIST really wanted to throw a party, but we talked them into it. And so different people that were involved with that, Dr. Elizabeth Donnelly, she is the current head of the Time and Frequency Division at NIST. Dr. Walter Copen down in the far right corner was the director of NIST, the entire organization, appointed by the Commerce Department. Dr. Philip Erickson, MIT, W1PIJ, PJE, excuse me, blah. Dr. Erickson is a professional scientist that works for MIT Haystack Laboratory doing ionospheric research. And he gave a very great speech talking about the connection between ham radio and NIST and really the new science that we've been doing and the work that we've been doing, the ham sci group has been doing for the last few years. And this was a very important launching point really for HamSci and NIST to get together our event. We'll talk about that in a second. Glenn Nelson, who is going to talk in a month and a half or 2 months from now, AE0GF gave a very great history and wrote a paper that is linked from our website called The Century of WWV. And so he's the one that wrote the paper and published it with NIST. Excuse me. They even had a birthday cake. And I ended up with the 10-meter antenna. I got that from the birthday cake. That was my big take from the 2019 event, other than helping put it on. Right after our event was COVID and a disaster really for the country, and people didn't go anywhere. And so in March of 2020, it happened to be the 100th anniversary of the first audio broadcasts from the National Bureau of Standards. They didn't necessarily use the call sign WWV, but they started using audio broadcasts to the Washington, D.C. area. It wasn't the first time they had done this, but it was the first time that they started broadcasting to a wider area. It had been demonstrated a while earlier. Glenn's going to talk about that in 2 months. He'll talk more about the details there. Also in October of 2020, we decided, well, let's throw a 101st anniversary. Why not? Now, the one that happened in March was about 5 operators, just people local to Fort Collins. But by the time we got to October, we started to talk to more people, reached out, and there was sort of a trend for operating events to be done from not just locally at a particular spot, but maybe from across the country. There were some different operating events that did that. The 13 Colonies was doing that, and also the 12 Days of Christmas. There was a couple different groups already doing that type of thing. So when we had the 101st anniversary, we got other operators from across the country to operate as well with the call sign WW0WWV, and we started something doing that. So this is the QSL card that we sent out for that event. In the fall of 2020, right after our event, we really got our email and communication started with people that had been involved prior to for the 2019 event, the original. And we tried to reorganize. We wanted to be an official club, and so we did. We got ourselves organized. We filed with the Colorado Secretary of State as a nonprofit organization, and we became a nonprofit club. And officially, I think we got started in about April is when we all signed the paperwork and made us an official club. And it was a lot of those people, David Kasdan, John Gibbons, who you saw in the pictures, as well as local folks, and we pulled the club together. And we started to put together a website and go from there. Also in the spring of 2021 was a very important meeting that was held. As a result of us getting our act together, David Kasdan, again, I give him credit for this. He is a go-getter. He works hard on everything. He reached out to NIST. We had made some good contacts as a result of 2019. And he reached out to NIST and said, well, how can we work together? Mike Lombardi, K0, K0WWX is his call sign, was the director of the time and frequency division under Liz Donnelly at the time of our event. And he's a ham radio operator. He had his license before, but because we came along, he got interested in it again. And he's an amazing writer. He's not necessarily trained as a scientist, but he is a scientist. And Mike really was a big spur to get this connection between NIST and also, whoa, excuse me, went way too fast there. So between NIST and WWV Amateur Radio Club and the Hamside group as well. Anyhow, Phil Erickson and Steve Serwin gave a great presentation to the NIST WWV H, what we created called the Modulation Working Group. Steve also gave a discussion about the activity and how we can take a look at the signals for these stations and determine heights of the ionosphere or excuse me, layers of the ionosphere based on frequency Doppler shifts, which are kind of neat. And the whole science behind this is, again, that the ionosphere, the reflective portion does change from night to day. And also through other events, meteor events will create momentary reflection points in the ionosphere for radio waves. And so when you look at the signal from WWV here in Fort Collins, it is a nice solid ground wave. We've got a very solid signal coming through. Whoops, excuse me. Solid signal coming through here. And the ground wave, there is no Doppler shift because there's no bouncing off the ionosphere. But if you look 1,500 miles away in Cleveland, Ohio, you will see quite a huge variation. In fact, anywhere where you're receiving a reflection off the ionosphere away from the ground wave effect of WWV, if you're receiving it, you're probably getting it altered by the ionosphere because the ionosphere is continually, it's like the top of an ocean. It's sort of vibrating up and down just a little bit. What we might call, what is referred to as gravity waves, which is interesting to talk about it that way. But the ionosphere varies. It's not steady. And of course, when the sun comes up, the D layer forms lower in the ionosphere, and there is a marked upward shift in the frequency because there is this movement of the reflective layer closer to the transmitter. And this movement will then cause what we call a blue shift. The red shift happens when the frequency drops at night, when the D layer disappears and the wavelength gets longer. And so that's what you typically get. Another picture shows a much more disturbed nighttime environment, up and down, up and down, and up and down. And these particular disturbances are referred to as traveling ionic disturbances. And through the GRAPE network, there is some really interesting science being able to evolve from all of this. As well as getting NIST and the HamSci group together, NIST agreed to let HamSci and this group that had formed to be able to create a modulation experiment. And NIST started broadcasting this on November 15th of 2021. And it is still on air today at 8 minutes after the hour on WWV and 48 minutes after the hour on WWVH. And you can hear the sequence of chirps and white noises and also these long coherent tones. And if you haven't heard this, I don't know if this will play through my audio or not. You guys tell me if I can play this. Skip. Okay. Can you hear this?
No.
No. Okay.
Not now.
All right. So we will, I know there's a way to force the audio through, but I don't have it here. Um, we'll go ahead and put this link up. You can go to this spot. This is actually a local ham. Uh, he has a site set up. Oh, I can't remember what the name of the site is. But anyhow, he recorded this and got some really good recordings of the modulation. So if you get a chance to see that, I encourage you to do that. Some of the science to come from this is time of flight measurements. It's expected that the 2.5 kilohertz and even 5 kilohertz clicks. I don't know if anybody ever realized this, but when you hear that click of the time tick, it's really a 1,000 or 1,200 hertz very short tone that sounds like a click to our ears. So it's kind of interesting. Again, time of a difference of arrival using the chirp interferences would also help. So there is an effort to change the modulation and introduce this into the WWV time code. And so this is a discussion that's ongoing. I don't know when this change is going to happen. I'm not even sure when they're going to take the WWV modulation experiment off the air, but I think after 3.5 years, it's been on there for a long time. And it's pretty amazing. Anyhow, in October of 2021, we did a 102nd anniversary, and this is our card that we had. This picture over here is a picture from Glenn Nelson and their NIST's drone that they had flying. And in the foreground, this is the 2.5 megahertz tower. It is about 60 megahertz or 60 is it 60 meters tall? Is that right? I think that's right, Matt. 2022, we had another event. In 2023, we threw an event for the 100th anniversary of the Time broadcast. This is really when WWV started doing its thing. We had a great event that we coordinated with the Museum of Discovery in Fort Collins. We also coordinated some incredible tours of the WWV and WWVB radio station and the NIST lab down in Boulder. And so we had a lot of people, local hams got to take part in this. In the foreground, there's Larry Olson. Larry, you're on our call tonight. And he had a great tour of these places too. It was pretty neat. And so he got to go down there. Tim Annabelle is in the background here. He is our past treasurer of the club. And we are getting a tour from the scientists that run this whole thing, which is amazing. This is the F3 over here on the right side. This is the F3 fountain clock. And this is part of the time code that runs the entire world, which is pretty cool. And this is a view of the laser coming on when the cesium atoms are falling back through this particular fountain clock. The whole concept is amazing. What is truly amazing, this is a picture on the left of Tim taking a picture of, in the middle there is a benchmark that was just recently when we went on these tours. It was only in there for a couple weeks. But they have to put that benchmark on the floor because the distance from the floor up to the distance of the clock, about 30 centimeters, taking relativity into account, time moves differently, which it just blows your mind when you think about it. A 30 centimeter difference, you mean your feet are older than your head. And yeah, it's kind of weird when you start thinking about all this stuff. But we got to see it firsthand right in the lab, right in the room. It was an incredible tour. Matt gave some great tours up at WWV, and this is us in the control room over there on the far left and on the right, standing next to one of the 50 kilowatt transmitters right in the room there, which is pretty neat. And showing the control room. If you notice over here, there's some values: 45 kilowatts forward power, 0.6 kilowatts coming back reflected. That's pretty good SWR. Same thing, only 800 watts coming back reflected power on the north array in this picture, which is pretty funny to think about. The event also included going to the museum, the Shy Y Club. Estes Valley came down, which was great. And Larry gave a great talk about their incredible event they had several years ago with an Aries contact, amateur radio on the International Space Station. Had a wonderful contact with the students up in Estes Park, Colorado. NCARC was there as well as Aries. We had the Boulder Amateur Radio Club. They demonstrated amateur television. This is a picture of Mark. We set up a HF station and operated from the museum. And this is Doug from Wyoming from the Shy Y Club giving a talk on satellites, which he is an expert on. He and RJ are awesome satellite operators. So, and this was in the Digital Dome Theater that the museum opened up for us, which was incredible too. It was a great event. The next year, well, actually, at the same time, I was about to present a paper in 2023 to the HamSci convention at the time in Cleveland, Ohio, but I came down with COVID, and so I didn't get to go. And this is the poster that we were going to present, talking about the modulation experiment in our club. We did a 104th anniversary that same year in October of 2023. And it just happened to be, I put the picture of WWVB North up there, which is a great picture taken by Dave Winnett, W0DDZ, with his drone that was up there. This was also the same time in October of 1923, talking about the farthest north expedition of Don Mix, excuse me, 1TS. If you ever, and we like to think our QSL cards have a theme. They're a lot of fun. This is the one that we just did for this last year. And of course, the big theme last year was this failure of the WWVB antenna. I was lucky enough to be back in Fort Collins to catch the International Towers team that was hired to climb the towers. It used to be that the WWV crew would climb the towers, but they no longer do that due to some NIST regulations and the government worried about their employees being 400 feet off the ground. I can't imagine why. Some other things going on. Part of our partnerships going on in 2024, we help distribute, and we are the ground wave measurement of the Grape 1.2 digital radio format that came out in the fall of 2023. And also, we are, again, just showing some data where it's just our ground wave, so there's not a big variation. Here is an image from a station farther off that shows what again, this is very similar to what the Grape 1 did, but this is a wide spectrum measurement. So you actually see multiple frequency variations showing up on here. The original Grape 1 would only show one frequency variation. And this is a unique picture because this is on the eclipse day. And right over here is the effect of the eclipse. Both the shadow coming in forming night and then the reemergence of day within a 2-hour period. Amazing data that we got from the Grape data, or the HamSci group got from the Grape data. I say we because I feel like I'm a big part of HamSci at this point. It's kind of fun. And this last summer we installed a Whisper transmitter. A WSPRsonde, it's called. It's an 8 frequency transmitter. We're now transmitting on 7 of the 8 frequencies. And we were asked to locate this at WWV. The crew at WWV decided the best place for this would be right next to the WWVB 500 kilowatt transmitter. But it works. And so we grabbed this tiny little empty container right there. The orange wires are the fiber optics going out to the Helix houses that keep WWVB tuned. So we're right in there, right in the thick of it with our equipment. This is provided by a company called Turn Island Systems in Washington State, and they built this. And this is through the Whisper group that works. Rob Robinette is the main lead on this. And so if you take a look at Whisper, you will find that there's some interest, our signals there. Under WW0WWV, it's being broadcast. This is a end-fed multi-wave or antenna, or multi-band antenna, excuse me. It goes up about 30 feet. with the upward part, and then this stretches about 100 feet over to a tower, an old pole. And by the way, whoops, by the way, that old pole, if you remember the pictures, I'm sorry, if you remember the pictures that Matt was showing of the poles carrying out the signal, that old pole used to carry out the WWVB signal out to the array out there. It's now buried underground, so we're taking advantage of the old equipment left behind. One of the interesting things was a measurement right after we put it on the air of the 30 megahertz or 30 meter, excuse me, signal of the whisper signal compared to the WWV 10 megahertz 30 meter signal. And this was recorded by a station in Long Island. And this is the Doppler shifts that were measured of both signals. And it's just flat out amazing, I think, that of course, you've got a lot more data points for the WWV signal coming through, but our whisper signal of 1 watt also showed almost the exact same variation, which is what you would expect. We've also got receivers now installed, helping out Hamsci. We've got the Grape 1, the Grape 1.2 DRF, the Grape 2, and there's a new radio, the RX8 888, running KA9Q's SDR software. And these are all uploading to several file servers that are collecting data. And of course, most of these are recording just a ground wave, which is not too exciting, but you have to have your, you got to have your control for your experiment. This was a neat project put together by Gwen Griffith in England, and he was looking at some of the interesting comparisons of the signals. We have two different antennas at this site of the equipment I just showed you. This is the horizontal antenna, and this is the vertical antenna. And he noted that we were actually getting an NVIS, a near vertical incident signal, probably off the ionosphere, because we had this horizontal antenna. So I thought that was a really interesting thing he noted. And my last thing I want to talk about, and we're way beyond time here, my apologies, but we send out a bumper sticker that is similar to this. I don't have a picture of it here, but it says, I set my clocks to WWV, Fort Collins, Colorado, and we've sent it out with our QSL cards. I still have about 400 or 500 of these bumper stickers that I send out whenever we get a QSL request. Well, NIST thought this was a great idea. And so as a very neat compliment to our club, they copied our bumper sticker. And this is their official bumper stickers that say, I set my clocks to WWV and I set my clocks to WWVH. And they even have one that says, I set my clock sets to WWVB. And so the automated part of it. And so here's the catch, and Matt can verify this. I verified it with him before we brought it up, and I never got to bring this up at our presentation this weekend. But if you would like an official NIST bumper sticker that says WWV and WWVH, send a signal report to WWV or to WWVH, 2000 East County Road, 58. Fort Collins, Colorado, 80524. And you send them a report, and Matt said they're supposed to be sending these bumper stickers back to people with a QSL card. So you could have an official NIST, I set my clocks to bumper sticker.
One of our guys here tonight has one.
What's that?
One of our guys here in the meeting has one. Has that.
Has it already?
Yeah, I got the WWVB.
Ooh, now the WWV,
There you go.
That's killer. That's killer. Now hold on. I'm gonna stop sharing because there it is. Oh, I love it. And the card that Matt was talking about.
Yeah, it was cool. I've got serial number 793. So there you go.
Right. And that's the other amazing thing. They do put the serial numbers on these things. That is really cool. So anyhow, that's the end of my presentation. And I got to talk a lot more today than I got to talk on Saturday.
And I've got one of the club bumper stickers.
Ah, there it is. Thanks, Fred. That's the one that we've been sending out. So how fun was it to get NIST to copy what we have been doing for years, right?
Pretty
That's one up.
amazing.
We got one up on the we got one up on NIST on that one, but it's pretty good. All right, well, that's the end of our presentation. Am I still recording? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you, everybody.